Hello and welcome to week number 5 of NMP 621, Introduction to Philanthropy and Fundraising Fundamentals. This week we will continue our look at donor motivations, giving theories, and patterns of donor giving. I just want to make a quick comment about the fact that we are now entering the second half of NMP 621. As we've noted before, these weeks do go by very quickly. You're now halfway through, a little more than halfway through. And I just want to say that I think that you all are doing very well. And I know that it is sometimes a struggle or a challenge to keep up with all of the reading and the assignments and the discussion forums, while at the same time you're working full-time or have a full-time personal life. It's a difficult challenge, and I want to say that I think you all are doing very well. My remarks this week will hopefully be helpful to you in terms of focusing your reading. As I said, this week we're going to continue to look at donor motivations. And in particular, I want you to be thinking about how your knowledge or your increasing knowledge in these donor motivations and patterns of donor behavior, how this will all influence how the organization or you as the fundraiser within the organization should fundraise. Next week we will be taking a closer look at the actual mechanics of fundraising. But that said, I do want to remind you all that this is an introductory course, and we're really basically scratching the surface in this course on the total picture of the elements that are required for a successful fundraising campaign or development resource department. And many of you may be following the fundraising track specifically in the NMP program, or you may be in the NMP management track. And I would suggest that there are a couple of courses that you might want to consider moving forward to just increase your level of understanding of philanthropy and fundraising. The first of which is NMP 623. 623 is the Resource Development Management course, and it's really an examination of the total development program. While many of you may not see yourselves as being fundraisers in your career, if you are on the track to be nonprofit leaders or managers, CEOs, or executive directors, it really is important that you understand at the very basic level the process that is in play in terms of development resource. So you may want to consider 623 as an overview of what that resource development process looks like from a management perspective. And then there's also 656, which is Communication, Relationships, and Philanthropy. And again, if you're going to be involved in any way in nonprofit management, whether as a fundraiser or as an executive, it's really important to have your awareness be complete in terms of how the process proceeds. I do want to take just a moment to say once again that that you really are in the middle of a very challenging process here in grad school, and I want to just support that and give you a little bit of motivation I do really appreciate the comments that you all made in last week's discussion forum, specifically the one in terms of your talking about the highs and lows that you all are experiencing. And I noted two things. One is that there seemed to be a consensus that everyone's impression of philanthropy was changing, had been changed, or is in the process of being changed as a result of this course, and that's good. I think that it's excellent to broaden that understanding of philanthropy so that it isn't exclusively the domain of high net worth donors, that it involves many levels of giving, not only in treasure but also time and talent. And the other thing is to point out that many of you express the same struggle in terms of managing your time. There's a great deal of time required of you in terms of reading all of the material and writing the assignments, and I want you to feel that I really believe that you all are doing a great job, and I don't want you to feel alone in your struggle to manage your time. One of the best pieces of advice that I can give you is simply to find your people. And by that I simply mean, I know that it's difficult in these online classes to find like thinking students or folks who could be of benefit to you in terms of the way they think or the research that they have or the networks that they have available to them. But do think about that in terms of your fellow students, not just in this class, but in your other classes as you move along. There are ways that you can connect with them, whether you, for example, choose to Skype with them over a cup of coffee and just talk about the week's assignment or support each other in some way. It's a very hard job that you've undertaken to go to grad school while at the same time living a full-time life outside of grad school, and it's important that you have people to support you in the process. In terms of this class, you're halfway through, and so hopefully there is some light at the end of that tunnel. And as you move through the NMP process, it's really important that you continue to seek the support of your fellow students as well. They will form a valuable network for you when you have completed the program and are out into the world. So now let's take a little look at the work of the week. When Gene Temple was speaking at Bay Path in January, one of the things that he said, which really resonates or will resonate with our reading this week in particular, is that fundraising is the difficult art of engagement. And I think that's a very important distinction, something for you to be thinking about this week as we continue to look at donor motivations. Notice he doesn't say that fundraising is the difficult art of raising money. It's about, for him, it's about the process of engaging with the donors and making that connection between the donors and the mission of the organization. Hank Rosso, very important person to have in your on your thought bank. He was one of the first gurus, if you will, of fundraising. In the 1970s, he started the fundraising school in California, and that is now a part of the School of Philanthropy in Indiana University. His philosophical approach, which is was certainly the basis for Temple's own approach, was that the fundraiser's job is really to advance the cause of philanthropy, and it really takes fundraising and philanthropy out of the realm of begging, seeking money. It's really more, his philosophy brings it more into a more positive light It's really an opportunity to invite donors to engage with the mission, with the organization, and that the fundraiser's job is a very important job. It's an important work in advancing the mission of the organization for which the fundraiser is seeking to raise resources, essentially. I'd like to read to you just a quick bit from one of Hank Rosso's articles. It comes from Achieving Excellence in Fundraising, which is a compilation of some of Rosso's work and also some other articles put together by, among others, Gene Temple. But this is Hank Rosso talking about fundraising as being a servant to philanthropy. He first starts out by quoting Peyton and Moody. Philanthropy is voluntary action for the public good through voluntary action, voluntary association, and voluntary giving. Now, of course, that quote will be very familiar to you. But then Rosso goes on to say, fundraising has been servant to philanthropy across the millennia. Through the procession of the centuries, the thesis has been established that people want and have a need to give. People want to give to causes that serve the entire gamut of human and societal needs. They will give when they can be assured that these causes can demonstrate their worthiness and accountability in using the gift funds that they receive. Ethical fundraising is the prod, the enabler, the activator to gift making. It must also be the conscience to the process. Fundraising is at its best when it strives to match the needs of the not-for-profit organization with the contributor's need and desire to give. The practice of gift-seeking is justified when it exalts the contributor, not the gift-seeker. It is justified when it is used as a responsible invitation, guiding contributors to make the kind of gift that will meet their own special needs and add greater meaning to their lives. And again, you can see how these two, the philosophy of these two men, Hank Rosso and Gene Temple, they really complement one another, and they're both based on the same premise. Once again, this week, we are going to be reading a little bit from Kim Klein. Kim Klein has written quite extensively on the subject of fundraising, and specifically fundraising in smaller, grassroots, smaller community-based organizations, mostly involving social change organizations. That is her background. For her, fundraising is not really about raising money. As it says here in her quote, it's really about raising donors. And this also speaks to the Gene Temple quote. So that really is the job of the fundraiser. The book that's in your text list is Reliable Fundraising in Unreliable Times, but she's written another of other wonderful books, which if you find that you like the way she writes, it's very accessible. You may, in point of fact, enjoy some of her other texts, Fundraising for Social Change, for example, or Fundraising for the Long Haul. I urge you to think a little deeply about the points that she seems to be making. She will talk about having a diversified donor base. And she also talks about the importance of individual engagement. And keep in mind, as she does, keep in mind the research that we've read, that most philanthropy comes from individuals, not from foundations or corporations. And she feels it's very important that organizations develop a pool of people who will not only give monetarily, but who will also volunteer, who will speak positively about the organization within the community, and who will also become advocates for the organization, and who will go out into the community and even raise funds. So this week we will talk more, read more, and you will be reflecting more about analyzing donor behavior. You will be reading the second half of the Seven Faces Philanthropy book. And I just want to, I know most of you really have liked the Seven Faces text, and that's wonderful. I do want you to keep in mind as you read the second half of it that at the time that research was done, which was in the late 80s, most of that research reflects probably all Caucasian men, with the notable exception of the socialite women that were profiled there. And that in the time since, there has been more deeper and more extensive research, and we're going to be reading some diversity essays from AFP, which is Association for Fundraising Professionals, and that will begin to broaden out your picture a little bit of some of these other donor populations. Since the Prince and File text was published, we know more about the differences in religious giving and the differences in demographic giving. And the more that you know about donor motivations and donor behavior, the better you will be as fundraisers or as leaders in the nonprofit world. The better you will be at engaging people with your own organization. So I just want to remind you that in the real world, individuals are just that. They are a compilation of many motivations and behaviors. And I want you to think about this class information, these texts that we're reading in class, really as guides for you for the future. But remember that any single donor will be a combination of these profiles, and it's all about getting to know your individual donors and engaging them on that level. Women in particular, you'll see, are brought out in these diversity essays from AFP. We now know, the research shows that women are really the key decision makers in the home, and therefore become very central to the decision making surrounding philanthropic decisions. The research shows us that female-headed households give more and give more often than male-headed households. Women seem to be more charitable overall than men. And all of this can be useful to you, for example, in terms of engaging donors. If for example, you were to make the appointment as a development professional, make the appointment to go to the man's place of business and attempt to engage him in a discussion without including his wife, that you may be going down the wrong path there. So it's just something to take into account, that when the more you know about your donors, the more you can engage them on a level that's meaningful to them. The discussion forums this week, you're going to be asked to really to choose a couple of these diverse donor populations, and to analyze that population, and to talk about where you see the similarities and where you see the differences to for example, the Prince and Files donor profiles, and how you would use this information to engage these different demographics as potential donors. Always remembering that the objective is to get to know them as individuals, not necessarily as coming from any one single donor population. So that's really it for my comments about this week. This week, which is week number 5, you will once again return to 4 discussion forums. And the assignment for the week is the donor interview, which hopefully you have already started. One of the things that I'm looking for in this donor interview is not just a compilation or a regurgitation of your conversation. I'm looking for you to think more deeply and to analyze what you find out as a result of this interview. How does this particular donor, he or she may or may not conform to one or more of the profiles that you've been reading about. So I really am looking for a little analysis here as well. Next week, week number 6, we will be talking more about the mechanics, the process, and fundraising readiness. And we will, again, have 4 discussion forums, and we will be taking a look at the importance of the case for support in building a fundraising appeal, and as part of the fundraising process. The assignment for week 6 will be a skill building assignment, which will require you to articulate a case for support. Please keep up the good work. I know that many of you, as I have said, are working full-time and you have full-time family obligations, and I really applaud you. I know how difficult it can be to keep up the full-time work of a grad student while doing all of these other things. So please don't feel overwhelmed. Reach out if you have questions or concerns. Again, I'm as near as your email, or you can call on my cell. Once again, that number is 845-380-0155. I look forward to our discussions in the forums this week, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks so much.